Auburn only needed 10 minutes per quarter in the second half to dismantle Alabama A&M, but that probably won't be the case as they play host to Cal. Meanwhile, this is now an SEC versus ACC matchup. Try and tell your grandma and grandpa about that back in the 1940s when this shindig was going on. Who comes out on top? Do we see more progression from Payton Thorne? And is the atmosphere of Jordan Hare too much for the Golden Bears? Welcome on into SEC Unfiltered. He's Dave Shumate. I'm Cole Thompson, breaking down everything you need to know headed into Saturday's contest. But real quickly, welcome to your new home for all SEC coverage. So make sure that you hit subscribe, the ring notification. That way you don't miss a single preview, reaction show, anything that goes on this channel. And of course, leave your comments down below what you want to see from your Auburn Tigers going into this week or your California Golden Bears. Make sure that you download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Follow us on social media, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. Make sure that you follow Dave on Twitter at Mock10Sports. Follow me on Twitter at Mr. Cole Thompson. And to keep up with all of our number one content, make sure that you visit SECUnfiltered.com. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the promo code SECU at sign up to get $50 instant play when you use your first $5 lineup. Promo code SECU at prizepicks.com. Dave, it was Alabama A&M. Let's just throw that out there. It was Alabama A&M. But if you're a Tiger fan and you see what you have at that weaponry for Payton Thorne this year, how are you not excited? How are you not on cloud nine realizing that this might be why we paid an egregious amount to get Hugh Freeze to leave Liberty to come down here? This is why we have seen a purpose in the right direction. This is why I understand why Freeze was a little bit hesitant to go out and add in a quarterback via the portal, but he might have been onto something because Payton Thorne looked awesome. Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson are certainly studs in the making. The offensive line was great. And now they get to up the ante by taking on a California team that won 31-13 against UC Davis.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to be completely honest, I mean, it's the best Auburn wide receiver room as a group. And I know they're young, that they've had in my lifetime, certainly. You can make a case probably forever. That's crazy to say, but I think that's more so the lack of wide receiver talent they've had overall from top to bottom of that program. But it's also a compliment to guys like Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, Malcolm Simmons, guys like that. You throw in Keandre Lambert-Smith coming over, older guy from Penn State. I definitely think it is. Cal Golden Bears here. I mean, this game was ugly. This game was a really ugly game last year, but it was 14-10 final. It was a late game, if I remember right. It was right after the Texas-Alabama game last year. I think it literally went right into it. It was just a low-scoring affair, ugly game. Auburn ended up squeaking it out. I think Auburn's better this year, and I think Cal is probably about the same. Again, Jaden Ott, the big running back who we all think maybe could be the best running back in the ACC immediately, he's banged up. Will he play this week? That's a big question mark for Cal. They're going to need their best playmaker. Heading down south to Auburn in September, early September at that. Will be interesting to see how the Bears acclimate to that as well. I think here, though, I think Auburn's got a massive line of scrimmage advantage here. I really do on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I mean, I loved how Connor Lew and Jeremiah Wright, the center and right guard for Auburn this past week. I know you mentioned it, Cole. You can't take a lot from Alabama A&M. You can't take a lot from Arkansas Pine Bluff against Arkansas. Any FCS, especially SWAC team now, there's such a gap now between with the NIL transport. The gap's even lower now. I mean, I saw Arkansas Pine Bluff was starting a 6'3", 250-pound left tackle. Like, you can get somebody hurt, but point is, you can't really take a lot of, like you said, anything from these games against SWAC teams. But I mean, like you said, Auburn looked really good. They hadn't done that to a lot of teams in a while. I mean, you're talking about a program that's coming off 3 straight losing seasons. But my point, Connor Lew at center, Jeremiah Wright, right guard. Go back and watch the film. Those are two guys that stood out. I think they have a massive advantage. I think that kind of continues this week against the Cal team. It's Justin Wilcox is still there. Just I feel like they have not been the same in the past 4 or 5 years. I mean, I feel like you consistently saw them winning 7-8 games when Wilcox first got there, but it's kind of been a downward trend ever since.
Wilcox is certainly one of those coaches that we're going to be saying is not on the scorching seat, but the seat is getting warmer by the day. It wasn't the best performance from Cal, if you were being completely honest. Fernando Mendoza,
6.5.
Fernando Mendoza had a pretty solid day, 15-22, 158 passing yards, found his way into the end zone. Jaden Ott scored 2 touchdowns, but they also did allow over 233 passing yards through the air. You do also look at where their run defense was. It was a bit hit and miss at times. I think that Cal is one of those teams that on paper is actually going to be better than what we see in this matchup. It just may take a little bit of trickling. And again, that's a major testament to where Auburn is. The premise of what you take away from Auburn, more importantly, is that it felt like Payton Thorne was more comfortable in this offense. And largely that's because of Hugh Freeze has built the offense to cater to number one strengths. But when you end up throwing for 322 yards, I don't care if it's 22 pass attempts, 300 yards is 300 yards. When you find the end zone 4 times and target multiple different receivers, that's a win in itself. When you see your backup also come on in and Hank Brown going 3 of 5 for 2 scores, that's a sign that you feel confident in the direction of your team. And then, of course, you look at the ground game, 9.8 yards per play. I understand it's Alabama A&M, but you knew that you had a mobile quarterback in Payton Thorne, who last year did a really good job in the Iron Bowl, keeping drives alive and ultimately taking his team down to the wire and making this really interesting because of his legs. Jarquez Hunter looked really good, 13.3 yards per play. Jeremiah Cobb looked good, 8.7 yards per play. So there's reasons to believe that, yes, there are certainly going to be overreactions when you play against an FCS team, when you play against a SWAC team, but also the way that you looked, I think, is really, really important in this game. There was confidence in Payton Thorne. There was no drop-off in terms of these freshmen having to live up to expectations. They felt like they were one in sync. They did not look like players who were just brand new to the Plains. And again, that's what you want to see moving into year 2. We can all agree that year 1 for most programs is setting a foundation. Year 2 is when you're supposed to elevate that stance. And when you look at the way that they performed on Saturday and how they plan on performing this Saturday, as much as I want to say that Cal is going to keep this thing interesting, they will. I truly do believe that in the first half, this will be one of those games that reminds you very iridescently to what we saw last year when they were out in the West Coast, Best Coast. But there does feel like they're clear indication of one team trending up and another team just hanging on as a middle of the pack, and probably a middle of the pack in the ACC.
No, I feel the line's, 13.5? I was looking at it last night. I feel really good about Auburn covering this because I think they have advantages, especially, if Jay Knott can't play and they're trying to just save him for ACC play, that's a difference maker a team like Cal, and really a lot of teams aren't going to be able to replace. I really think that interior, you go back and watch the Cal game a little bit. I put on their highlights, like the 8-minute highlight from that game. And even UC Davis was getting some pressure off the edge. I think Auburn's defensive front, DJ Durkin, an underrated defensive coordinator, likes to dial it up, send simulated pressures. But I also think he's going to let his guys up front work. I could see easily just a big day for guys like Jalen McLeod, Keldrick Fogg, Isaiah Rakes, Philip Bleedy are just guys who come to mind just initially. I don't think Cal gets a lot of push. They only scored 10 points against Ron Robertson, Auburn's defense last year. Take away Jay Knott if he's not playing again. I don't know that. Even Jay Knott's playing, I don't think there's going to be a lot of room to run at Auburn. Place will be energized. They'll be fired up. Auburn's 1-0. Hugh Freeze's first quote-unquote big game against a Power 4 team at home. I just think the Let's
just make sure that we say that. Of the season, his first big game at home.
Of the season, yeah. Of the season. I just think Auburn's got a massive advantage up front on the defense. I think they're going to be improved up front. They weren't bad last year. I think it was a misnomer. Sometimes people get on Ron Roberts, but I think DJ Durkin is the better overall coordinator. I think they come in. I just don't see Cal producing a lot of points or a lot of explosive plays at all. I really don't. They average what they do. I got it right here. They average 2.7 yards per rush on Saturday against UC Davis. They had 102 yards on 38 rushing attempts. That's not getting a lot of push against UC Davis. Auburn's going to be a lot better on the road. Their first road game, Cal. I feel pretty confident in Auburn.
When you look at the main game plan, what should be the standard? For me personally, I think it's setting up the explosive plays with the run. Having the ability to have dialed up rushing attempts, RPO systems to where you trust Jarquez Hunter, you allow yourself to read the defense. If you feel like the pressure is coming on the inside, if you're Payton Thorne, you tuck and run, take it to the outside, pick up a good first down gain. You try to get Cal to fall into the box to allow you to take those shots downfield. Because if Thorne looked great when he was able to step up and deliver with a clean pocket, And there also just feels like there's so much more speed on this team than what we saw last season. And they have really good talent at tight end with Rivaldo Fairweather. That is a human cyborg. I think that when you look at guys like Robert Lewis coming on in for Georgia State, he can do a little bit of everything from across the middle of the field. But you have Perry Thompson, Keandre Lambert-Smith, and Cam Coleman, all of which put on a performance that we are going to be talking about for a while. They set a standard for what the future looks like for these teams. And then you also got to throw in Miles. And so when you throw his name into the mix, there's so much value on being able to force a defense to think, we're beating you down in the trenches. We're finding ways to make this a low standard battle. We're not able to get the good We're not able to push and pile drive forward. We got to be able to continue to just fight what we think defensively is going to work because they continue to run the ball. And then you just watch as it's a 40-yard pass down the field. If they can find a way to make sure that Cal's defense is susceptible to the run, it's eventually going to set up the pass because they're going to be so codependent on trying to get Jarquez Hunter down. They're not going to be paying attention to one of multiple receivers who I think this week are truly going to start establishing themselves as where they rank in terms of consistency, X factor, all of that. And the beauty is that Auburn doesn't need one of them to be a superstar overnight. What they need is just guys who can be B-plus type receivers right now that will grow and develop into A-plus receivers. And the good news is that you have the talent there to do so.
Yeah, that's what Cal did last year against them. They just loaded the box, dared them to keep running the football with Jarquez Hunter and Damari Alston. That's probably going to be their game plan this year, I would probably assume. I mean, Peter Sermon, I believe, is their DC. He'd been at Washington. I think he's at Texas for a brief minute. Justin Wilcox is a defensive guy as well. I bet they sell out. If I had to guess, they're probably going to sell out on the run and be like, look, I know they've improved their weapons and skill guys on the outside. I mean, Helen Keller could tell you that by watching this game. But let's see them prove it yet. We're the first team that has a pulse that they're going to actually have to show it against. Let's see if Payton Thorne can distribute the football to his obvious improved outside playmakers. So I think you're going to see them still like, we're going to stop the run. If they're able to make some plays on the outside, we'll adjust from there. But we're going to sell out on the run first, make you prove you can consistently make those explosive plays with your improved guys on the back end. But I think they're really going to make – I want to see if Payton Thorne's improved or not. That would be my game plan if I'm Cal. I would assume they probably do the same because that's what they did last year.
Dave, again, we know that it was Alabama A&M. You see a more improved Payton Thorne, but this is also a more improved defense. And this is going to be a defense that is a consistently massive upgrade over from what you saw last week. So take Payton Thorne out of the equation. Offensively, who is one player that you want to see create a separation where we're talking about them on the live show come Sunday morning?
Offensively for the Auburn Tigers, I want to see a little bit more out of Percy Lewis at the left tackle spot. I feel like across the board, they played pretty well. I mean, again, it's Alabama A&M. Take it for what it is. I just talked about how the gap between FBS and FCS now is even worse. There's already a massive gap. It's even worse now. But I think Dylan Wade at left guard played well. I mentioned Connor Luke, Jeremiah Wright at the center guard spot. I want to see the left tackle, Percy Lewis, a little bit of a back bender, waist bender, can play a little lazy at times. That's the position, the Mississippi State transfer, that I thought that they think they were going to get more out of in the spring and through the summer and fall camp, and it just hasn't happened. I was watching him the other night briefly on the replay, and it was like, man, dude, he takes plays off at times. He's the only one when they're really not finishing, can play a little lazy, a little stiff in his lower. Like I said, he's a back bender, waist bender, whatever the hell you want to call it. People call it different terms. Percy Lewis is that guy, though. I want to see him take that next step. Can he be a guy Auburn can count on for Payton Thorne's blind side? That is something I want to see. I think he's going to be key down the line to see if Auburn, if they're going to be an 8-win team or a 9-win team or maybe even 7-win team, if that doesn't if his maturation process doesn't occur. I know he's a senior, but if he doesn't get better, I should probably turn that. So I'm going to go with Percy Lewis at the left tackle spot.
I think that when you look at all these wide receivers, you're trying to find that security blanket, but also sometimes you just need to see the veteran take that next step forward. And Robert Lewis was one guy I was very excited to see join this squad in the offseason after what he did last season at Georgia State. 1 catch for 8 yards. And maybe that's because of you look at other teams and how they like to just see their young players start developing, because you know that they can go feel like they're catching up when they play against an Alabama A&M, when they play against an FCS Furman, when they play against a UT Chattanooga. But at the same time, when you join a program and you are a veteran, the reason why you're there is because of the experience. And when you are going up against a much more I would say, physical defense than what you're going to see from last week when you are going up against a much more cleaner secondary. And when you have a guy that stands 5'10", but great speed in the open field, also a pretty solid catch radius, does not drop many passes, finds a way to create ways to win at the line of scrimmage, I feel like that this is where you're going to see why he was brought in. Because if, yes, you have guys like Malcolm Simmons, yes, of course you have guys like Perry Thompson, yes, of course you have guys like Cam Coleman, and they're going to be X factors for your squad in the next 2 or 3 years. But for the here and now, maybe one of them per week has a great performance. Keandre Lambert-Smith and Robert Lewis are there to stabilize and be able to kind of pick up the speed a little bit faster. Let's see what he does this week is probably, I would say, a number 2 or number 3 target in this passing attack. Defensively, Fernando Mendoza is a little bit of a mobile runner. I mean, we both know that he can run in the open field. I also think that he can throw a ball extremely well. He's got great arm strength. I want to see what Trill Carter does to be able to win that battle. You know, this is a Texas transfer that comes on in after a 1-year stint with the Longhorns. During a time when he was at Minnesota, he was one of the better all Big Ten defensive tackles. So what type of value does he bring winning at the point of attack to corral a player like Fernando Mendoza to have to take those deep shots downfield? How quickly do you go ahead and get that ball out? How quickly can you win at the line of scrimmage to get your hands in the right place, bulldoze past an interior offensive lineman, put him on his ass, and then get back there to make Mendoza have to hit the reset button? If you do that, I think that you're in a really, really, really good spot for Auburn, because if you're basically taking away one of the elements that makes Mendoza a very tricky quarterback to game plan for, but at the same time, you also are forcing him to have to extend plays deep downfield.
Yeah, I'm going to stay on the defensive front as well. I'm going to go on the edge, though. I'm going to go Jalen McLeod, and I think you can make a case for Keldrick Falk as well. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for them to make plays, either assisting in some sacks, pushing them up for your boy Trill Carter or Isaiah Rakes, making him move up in the pocket, or them just making some sacks on their own. I don't think Cal's offensive tackles are very good. I think Auburn's improved pass rush. I've heard them all offseason, guys that work there big. Dude, Jalen McLeod, and I think Jalen McLeod is going to be the guy, the App State transfer who came into Auburn last year, and people were expecting to have a big year. If I'm right, he had a big game against A&M in 22, the year App State actually beat Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher. But I think they thought he'd have more last year. I think this is kind of his year. And I heard Keldrick Falk's also a kid is probably going to get better as the year goes on. I mean, just this week, what you had, they gave up 1 sack. They gave up 6 tackles for a loss against UC Davis, a team they're much better than. Auburn, I think, it improved front 7, improved on the edges, improved on the interior of the defensive line. I think they're all going to kind of work in unison, but I think it's going to start with Jalen McLeod on the outside. I think he's going to get a sack or 2. And he's going to ultimately have an assist a couple of times too, pushing him up in the pocket for guys like you mentioned, your boy Trill Carter and some other guys on that Auburn interior. So I'm looking forward to seeing specifically Jalen McLeod, but also both edges guys. I know you said 1, but 2, Keldrick Falk's the other guy to keep an eye on as well.
Kickoff at 2:30 at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Game will be televised on ESPN Central Time. Dave, you and I both can agree. I think that Auburn, just on paper and on production and the consistency that we saw last week, walks away with the win. Line set at 13, over-under set at 53.5. Are you hammering both, or are you just going to be a little hesitant? What's your overall prediction?
I probably wouldn't hammer the over-under just because I don't think Cal's going to score a ton. I'm going to go Auburn. I do. Auburn's one of my favorite plays of the week, though, that minus 13 at home. I like Auburn 34-14. I feel pretty comfortable. This is one of my favorite ones as we stand here on Tuesday around lunch. But I think Auburn just kind of handled it. I think especially if Jaden Knott's out, I mean, that's their best player by far, one of the better players in the ACC. Again, I just think there's a mismatch for Auburn on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I think both sides of those line of scrimmage. I think Connor Liu, Jeremiah Ryder are going to be able to get pushed on the interior for one of the more under-the-radar players in the SEC, Jarquez Hunter. He's not talked about enough. And I think on the other side, I just mentioned it, not going to be long-winded again. I just think those interior guys, I think the interior guys like you mentioned, Trill Carter, Isaiah Ranks, and I think the edge guys like I mentioned, Keldrick Falk and Jalen McLeod. I just think it's something Cal's not ready to see. UC Davis was in the backfield. I wouldn't say living, but I would say they got some consistent push in that backfield as well. They caused some issues with Cal. If Jay Knott doesn't play, where do they go there? I mean, who are they feeding the rock? That's my thing. I think Auburn wins this one pretty comfortably. This is definitely gonna be one of my plays for the weekend for sure. That minus 13.
I agree with you. I'm not touching the over in this game. I think it's just a little too rich for my liking. But I will say, when you look back at Auburn and what moves that they made in the portal, what moves they made on the recruiting aspect of things, they have separated themselves to where they know they're going to be a world-class beater soon. They may not be there now, but you're watching as more players, more recruits are actually seeing Auburn as a viable destination. They like the direction that Hugh Freeze has brought this team. They like the direction of where these young playmakers can actually elevate their chances to expand their horizons and be really standout names in the SEC. And also, I think with Auburn, they feel like a team that kind of last year shot themselves in the foot far too many times. They haven't done that since the start of spring football. I mean, since the start of spring practice. They've done well in fall camp. They've established an identity. I think, again, you bring up Jarquez Hunter. This is a game where we're, I think, really going to watch him explode. He's going to have a couple of big-time runs in the open field, set up Auburn with manageable situations to where they're always capitalizing and walking away with points. I'm a little bit nicer. I do think that you will allow a few touchdowns if you are Cal. I think you will get into the end zone a few times. So I'm going to go with 38-17 as the final score. I do agree. Hammer that 13-point line. It's very much in favor of your schedule. But for me, I just look at this Auburn team. They feel like a roster that wants to set a standard. And if they do set a standard, they're in a great location moving forward. You got 2 more games before the real, actually, you can't even say that. 1 more game until the real major test after this one with Arkansas. And then you go ahead and close out your 5-month stay at Jordan-Hare Stadium with Oklahoma. These next 2 games, regardless of how you feel, they're great litmus tests to see what needs to be improved before the start of conference play.
Yeah, Hugh Freeze 100%. I'm sure he's been hammering to his staff in his head, kind of like, look, man, we struggled in this game last year. 14-10, we were better than them, but, man, they turned the football over to, I think they turned it like 5-6 times, I think, to Auburn. He's like, we didn't look great. It was a win, but it was an ugly win. If we can go show significant improvement, win this game comfortably, it shows in year 2, hey, we have taken so we've taken the next step. I'm not saying we're going to compete for the SEC, but look how much better we played against the team we played last year when you're comparing both teams and the improvement and the ascension of the Hugh Freeze era. So I think that's in his mind too. They're going to want to show out. Again, it's at home. They should. Auburn's a better team than they were last year. I think Cal's probably about the same to a little worse. Again, the thing to watch on Jaden Knott, if he's out, it's going to be tough for Cal to produce much of anything offensively. But I don't know the official word from him. I know it's just not long-term or season-ending for him, but who knows if he'll be out this week.
Let them know in the comment section down below. We both have Auburn winning. We both have Auburn covering the 13-point spread. But let us know, where do you think Auburn ranks going into this week? What's your score prediction? Make sure that also you're following us on social media, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. Follow Dave on Twitter at Mock10 Sports, me on Twitter at Mr. Cole Thompson. Download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. And to check out all of our great work, make sure you visit SECUnfiltered.com. For Dave Shumate, I'm Cole Thompson. War Eagle Auburn's fans, later.